hasn't been to any. My name is Kim Barnetson. I'm the childminding partner for the Stronger Practice Hub. And tonight we've got Damon as our IT support, and hopefully Lisa from the barn will be joining us at some point as well. I've called this webinar Having Confidence in Your Practice, and this is as a response to feedback we've had from previous webinars, but also when I talk to you when I'm out and about doing best practice sessions, or when I've had people to come and visit me in my setting, that overridingly the thing that people say is they don't know how to explain their practice to someone else. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And hopefully by the end of this session, you will have a little more confidence in what you're doing, or you'll have confidence in how to explain what you're doing. Let's skip on to the next one. So here's our agenda for this evening. You know you're supporting the children in your setting, but how can you explain it? Getting to know the EYFS, understanding terminology. So I've put things in there like schemas, curriculum, pedagogy, the 3 I's. Knowing the child, making sure you have an enabling environment, recording and sharing progress, time for a chat, and then quite a lot of references tonight. Now, you will see as we go through this, there's quite a bit of repetition, and that is because actually having confidence in your practice boils down to a few key points, but I'm just going to keep going over them so that it hopefully sort of makes sense by the time we get to the end of it. So, knowing the child, you know the children in your setting really, really well, don't you? Oh, I'm really sorry. I think this slide might be in the wrong order, but don't worry, just go with it. What it really boils down to, if we were thinking of someone coming into our setting, so that could be a new parent coming in, could be someone from the local authority coming to talk to you about your setting. It could be an Ofsted inspector. It could be someone like me in my other job as an assessor coming into your setting. What we want to know is about the child's learning journey. We don't want to see lots of paperwork. In fact, if you were looking at Ofsted, they don't want to see any paperwork. What they want to see, and what I want to see when I come in as an assessor, is can you explain how you are supporting a child's progress? Now, one of the things I think works really well, and I definitely do it myself in my setting, is once in a while, when the children are busy, engaged in something, sit down with a notepad and look at one of the children and think about their progress in your setting. So let's have a think about when that child started with you, what could they do and what did they know? Obviously, it might have been they were a baby and obviously their development's moved on and they could be 2 or 3. But let's say, for instance, a child started with you 6 months ago. What did they know then? And what could they do when they joined your setting? Now, make a few notes about what can they do now? How did you help them to learn that? What did you do? What opportunities and experiences did you put in their path to help them with that development? And then, what do you want them to learn in the future? And how are you going to help them to do it? That's as simple as that's your whole curriculum and pedagogy and everything all in one summarized sort of little paragraph there. But if you can do that regularly, if you can sit down and just think about a child in your setting and think, and you know all this, I know when I speak to you all, if I say, tell me about that child, you have that in your head. And it's about having the confidence of being able to explain how you've supported that child's development and how you're continuing to support their development. So I think that's, for me, it's quite a handy tip to have, especially if you work with someone else. If you've got an assistant or someone like that, do it with each other. You know, one of you writes about another child and then explains that child to your assistant, and vice versa. It's just a really helpful way of getting that information out of your head and seeing how you actually explain it. So let's have a think about the EYFS. Now, the the EYFS for childminders is actually not a very long document. I don't know how many of you have read it, but I know quite often the questions I get are from people who haven't read the EYFS. And I would say just take 20 minutes to read it, and it will really set your mind at rest, because a lot of people are really worried about what you can or can't do, or what you're meant to have ready, or whether you've got to have lots of documents and tracking development apps. You haven't got to have any of that. So here I've got just a couple of quotes from the EYFS just to clarify these points. So when assessing whether an individual child is at the expected level of development, childminders should draw on their knowledge of the child and their own expert professional judgment. Childminders are not required to prove this through collection of any physical evidence. They do not. So anyone, me coming in as an assessor, someone from the local authority, an inspector, they don't need to see, and they won't look at any tracking documents. Whether you choose to keep them or not is completely up to you. I do understand that some people find it helpful to still use tracking documents. And especially, I would say, maybe if you're newer to early years, those of us that have been in the early years a long time have development matters imprinted in our brain and birth to 5 matters. So you get, eventually, it's sort of just, it comes naturally. But if you're new to it, or you're not sure about what typical development looks like, then it's absolutely fine to track. But please, please, please don't get bogged down in lots of paperwork. I still have childminders saying to me that the paperwork is a difficult thing. And actually, we can see here, we're not required to have any physical evidence of a child's development. It should just be in your head. And I know that it is, because when I see you out and about at groups or whatever, and I ask people and say, you could tell me about this child, couldn't you? And if any of you could do that about any of the children in your setting, you could in depth tell me about that child, what the favourite things are to do, any areas where they're struggling, something where they might have been really interested in something, so you supported them in that. That's what you need to know. You've already got it in your head. But if you feel that you need records, that's absolutely fine. The EYFS also tells us that ongoing assessment, it's actually known as formative assessment, is an integral part of the learning and development process. It involves practitioners understanding children's interests and what they know and can do, and then shaping their teaching and learning experiences for each child, reflecting that knowledge. In their interactions with children, childminders should make and act on their own day-to-day observations about children's progress and observations that parents and carers share. However, there is no requirement to keep written records in relation to this. So it's backing up what we've just said, isn't it? We're not required to keep written records, and really that information is already in our head. What I particularly like about this is act on their own day-to-day observations about a child's progress, because children change from day to day. So in the past, anyone who's been childminding a long time will have had that thing where we had to do long-term plans, a year's plan for a 2-year-old. I mean, it's ridiculous, because the 2-year-old changes moment by moment, don't they? Something they're particularly interested in this morning might not be of any interest at all in the afternoon. And so how can you possibly predict what they're going to need to learn in 6 months' time? It's just not possible. And if you're still doing observations for observation's sake, so again, in the past, we would maybe have to do a certain number of observations about a child, I would say, just don't worry about it. Observation for observation's sake doesn't prove anything, doesn't support anything, doesn't really help you. What helps you is just knowing the child really well in your day-to-day observations. So I was thinking about this and trying to think, what would an example be? Let's imagine that a parent comes to your house on a Monday morning with their child and says, oh, over the weekend, little Timmy use the potty. So we've decided now's the time to go forward with potty training. And you think, wow, that's great. Well done, Timmy. And you say to the parent, that's really good. And then you make sure the potty's out, that you've got a spare set of clothes, that you support the child by taking them to the potty, that you at least just get them used to the idea of what the potty is and where it's going to be in your setting. That's it. You're supporting their learning and development in that very simple thing. And I know you're doing that every single day, all day long, because you see the child, you are interacting in the moment. You know, we've spoken about in the moment planning before. That's what this means. So here we are again.
Kim, sorry. Sorry to interrupt. There's been a couple of things in the chat.
Sure.
Lorna's asked well, it's kind of following on from what you just said, how often do you observe each child? And Angela said in her setting, an observation, she has an observation each week for each child.
Right.
So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or
Thank you. My own personal thoughts are I don't do observations. The knowledge of the child is in my head. So I would say that if you're doing an observation of a child, you're picking, I would say if you want to do an observation of children, that's absolutely fine. It's completely up to you. I would observe those wow moments rather than it's 10 o'clock on a Friday, I've got to observe Timmy, because that's not really telling you anything. The thing they're doing at 10 o'clock on a Friday might not be the thing that's really making a difference to their development. And also, you can slip into the thing of getting the child to prove to you that they can do something by setting up an activity. Let's say you want little Timmy again to learn colours. So 10 o'clock on a Friday is the time you're going to do that observation. So I'm going to sit down and we're going to do a colour activity, and I'm going to observe whether Timmy knows his colours or not. Now, if that is your pedagogy, we'll get to that in a moment, that what the meaning of the word is, that's completely up to you. But when we look at things like the Education Endowment Foundation and evidence-based research, that really shows us that that is not an effective way to support development. So I don't mean to dismiss anyone else's practice. It's your business, it's your practice if that's how you want to do it. But let's have a look at this picture here. How about if I took a picture and that was the first time this child had used scissors by themselves? That would be a wow moment. That would be worth observing, wouldn't it? But if that child spends all day, every day using scissors and it's nothing different, what would be the benefit to that child of doing that observation? So this is what we mean by it's all about knowing the child in your day-to-day observations, not set observation once a week or once a day even, or 3 times a month, or whenever it is. You have to look at that observation and say, actually, what was the benefit of that? What did it tell me? How is that supporting the child's learning? And because we know that child-led development is much more beneficial, it's evidence-based. We know that, don't we? That it's much more effective for children to lead their own learning. If we slip into that thing where a child has to perform in order for us to say, yes, now Timmy knows how to do this, tick, 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 and then I do the observation about it, that's not beneficial to children's development. It's just evidence-based. Research tells us that. It's not just me, it's not just the way I run my practice, but it is totally your practice and up to you how to do that. I would say, who are you doing those observations for? We know that Ofsted won't look at any of that. It will all be based on your knowledge of the child, not on if you had an inspection, not on paperwork. They're not going to look at any paperwork. They're not going to look at little Timmy's learning journey folder, no matter how lovely it might be. They will ask you about Timmy. So they're going to ask, as it says down here, think about the child in your setting. You would be asked, tell me about Timmy. What could Timmy do when he joined your setting? What is he doing now? How are you supporting his development? And have you got any concerns? And if you've got concerns, how are you supporting those? So to go back to the observation question, the only time I would do what we would call like more formal observations is if I do have a concern about a child's development and I need to build up some evidence to pass on to another professional. That would be, for instance, a child with a communication problem, where I had a concern about that, but I knew I wasn't going to be able to refer them for 6 months. I would spend 6 months doing an observation based around probably reading the same story or something like that, or I might just do observations throughout the week when I hear that child talking. And that would just be so I'm building up like a portfolio of evidence to pass on to the speech and language team when they go for their referral. Again, completely up to you how you want to do that. And that's what it says in the EYFS. It's up to you. If you want to have a paper-based or an app-based development tracker, it's completely up to you. And if you want to use observations, it's completely up to you. But everything we read, all the evidence we have tells us that it's not really an effective method of supporting development. And actually, without being rude, then you're sort of wasting your time when you could be spending time actually just interacting with the child. Oops, sorry, got my book on the floor.
Sorry, Kim, I've got another couple of things
Yeah,
linked
go
to
for it.
exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So Talia said in our setting, the observations are more for one, the parents' insight, and two, we link them to the 7 areas to ensure each child has opportunities in all areas. What do you think of this reasoning for observations?
I
There's
think
another
they.
point in a minute that I'll share.
Okay. So I answer that one first, or yeah, okay, I'll just do
Yeah,
that one. I think it's completely up to you if that's what you want to do. But I would also argue you probably know those children well enough to know if they're missing out in any area of development, don't you? You know, you're spending maybe 10 hours a day with those children, 5 days a week, maybe. Um, you know them really well. You know them as well as you would know your own children, and you don't have to write reports or use tracking devices for your own children, do you? I do understand that some parents might might be concerned about their child's development or anything like that. And if that supports the parent and helps to reinforce what you're doing with the parent and working in partnership, that's completely up to you. When I have that type of situation, I normally rely on photos. So I would be taking pictures of the children and then just sending that with of the child, I mean, and sending that home with the parent saying, oh, you know, this child's using the scissors today. I've sent you a couple of photos, or you know, the type of thing where, oh, we were worried about so and so, but actually I've noticed he's starting to do it now. Whatever it is, you know, rather than a formal type of report. We'll get to reports in a minute. I hope that answers that question. Yeah. What was the next
the
one?
second one, I think you kind of touched on it
Yeah.
right just then. It says, I agree it's for parents' reassurance. If you have a child unsettled, it's nice to see pictures of them happy and engaged while in my setting. I also use it for my own benefit for when I do report to parents.
Yeah, that's fine. If that's
Yeah.
what you want to do and it works for you in your practice. So, where I'm coming from with this is I'm using this evidence-based research and I'm looking at what the EYFS tells us. And the EYFS is telling us you don't need to do it. And evidence-based research is saying it's not necessarily an effective way of supporting children's development. But if it works for you in your setting, go for it. You know, you're your own boss, aren't you? But um, the whole point of this webinar really is to think about having confidence to be able to talk about the development of the children in your setting rather than having to look at a document to say, well, I can see that Timmy has got good physical skills, but I'm concerned about his communication. You should, if we were talking about it from an Ofsted point of view, you should know that off the top of your head. You should be able to just tell them that what you're doing with Timmy to support whatever area that poor Timmy is getting. He's the child with all the problems tonight. Um, uh, you should be able to just explain that to an inspector or an assessor or anyone like that. To come in as a parent is slightly different because you're obviously not going to talk about other children's development to them. But that we'll come on to that in a moment. But again, if it helps you and reassures you that you're covering everything, then that's completely up to you. You'll see in a minute when we get to the enabling environment, how having that in an enabling environment set up. So you've got these two things hand in hand, I always think anyway, an enabling environment and a responsive practitioner is just what children need. And you could perhaps, I would argue, your time could be spent more wisely or more effectively sitting with the children and modelling or scaffolding their development. I'm not saying you don't do that, but that time you've taken away to go and sit and do observations is not necessarily, well, if you're looking at it from an evidence-based point of view, is not necessarily as effective as it could be. I'm going to skip on to the next thing. I can see we've got a few questions, but I'll just go on to the next thing. So what do we do if little Timmy, we might as well use him as our example tonight, if we start to notice a gap in Timmy's development? So sometimes, we all know, don't we? Sometimes that's something that you and the parents can work on and support them together. That might be that they just need a little bit of confidence in something. It might be something as simple as learning to get ready for putting shoes on and things for going off to school. That's something that you and the parents can work on together. But it might be that you need to seek external support. So like for a health visitor, speech and language, that type of thing. You might have to refer someone to the GP so that they can have a hearing test, or there's all sorts of things, aren't there? Depending obviously on the needs of the child. So although development matters and birth to 5 matters are no longer statutory documents, I would suggest it's worth having them just as a tool to support you and your theory that Timmy has an area that needs extra support. They're really good. I'm sure you've all got both of these, but for anyone who hasn't, I would definitely get both documents, development matters and birth to 5 matters, because development matters is a little bit more skimpy, might be the right word for that, whereas birth to 5 matters has a little bit more detail. And using them both together cover all types of scenarios with children, depending on how their development's working, and also give you some really good ideas for how you can support that development area at home or in your setting and at home with the parents. But they do both state they are not to be intended as tick charts of development. They're a tool to help you identify areas that might need extra support. So as I say, the only time personally in my setting that I would be doing written observations would be to build up this portfolio of evidence for a child that might need it to go on to seek extra support, because I think most of us that have been in that situation know it's no good going to a speech and language therapist and just saying, I've got a few concerns, but not being clear about what they are. You need to be able to say, this child cannot do whatever, or this child, when they talk, it sounds like this. You have to be specific. They want actual evidence. They want you to write out, sentences and things like that. So they can also track their development over those 6 months or whatever it is. But again, it's completely up to you. The whole point of these webinars, really, this webinar is particularly, is to give you confidence in that you do not need that paper security blanket. It should be in your head. Should we answer another couple of questions? I can see there's some more up there. Is there anything I need to answer, Damon?
Sorry, hold on a second. Sorry, Kim. I've got no. I think We've covered everything. There's one about scissors, about when to use scissors, what age to introduce scissors, and what type of scissors. But I don't know if you wanted to leave that to the end.
Yeah, I'll do that at the end.
Uh,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Ready?
I
I'll
think
move
that's
on.
it. That's it. You're up to date on the chat.
Lovely. Thank you, Damon. Okay, so one of the things I think that we've noticed when we've been doing these webinars is that um, quite a few practitioners are not sure what some of the terminology is. And I think I'm not saying you have to use this terminology when you're describing your practice and the development of the children, but it's quite helpful to just know what it is, isn't it? Just to be familiar with it. So that if someone says it to you, let's say, for an instance, if I come in as an assessor and say, can you tell me what your curriculum is? You know what I mean. And it's very, very simple. So schemas, you may have come to our schema webinar. And if you haven't, have a look on the YouTube channel, because that was a really, I think, helpful way of just describing schemas, what they are and how you can support them in your setting. But we know now that a schema is the way a child explores a certain idea while they're playing. I would say don't get too hung up on the types of schemas. It's not the end of the world if you can't remember a trajectory schema or an enveloping schema. But I'm going to give you an example of an enveloping schema for anyone who didn't come to the webinar or isn't familiar with the term. So with a schema, the child's brain is saying, I need to find out everything that happens when I envelop something. So today I'm going to envelop this dinosaur in Play-Doh. Tomorrow I'm going to envelop cuddly toys in blankets. The next day I'm going to envelop myself in paint. And then I'm going to envelop cars in mud. Anything that they can wrap, put something in, cover it up, is that type of schema. And your brain, their brain, and actually ours as well, because we've all done this as children, is building up a block of knowledge. This is what happens when I do it this way. This is what happens when I do it the next way. It's like an experiment that a child keeps repeating with changing the variables as a scientist would, until they've learned everything they need to know about, in this case, enveloping, and then they move on to something else. So that's what we mean by schema. It's really interesting, actually, once you know about schemas and you can see them in the children, and then you can support them. And it's very, very easy to support children with schemas. They don't need any fancy resources. It just means that you might think slightly differently about how you can offer your current resources to the children. So if you had a child who had a rotational schema, you might go somewhere where there's a really big hill that they can roll down. You might take balls with you so they can roll the balls down the hill. It's as simple as that. You haven't got to do anything fancy or buy anything in. So then curriculum. Now, curriculum, I think, for early years practitioners and childminders in particular, feels like a little bit of a formal word, a word that should belong in schools. Actually, curriculum just means what you want the children to learn in the time that they're with you. And when we think about it like that, and we're using the EYFS, that's what we want the children to learn, don't we? We want them to work their way through all these lovely areas of learning in a holistic manner until they go off to school. That's what you want them to learn. Also, I would suggest that children lead their own curriculum, and if you allow that, then we know from an evidence-based research point of view that that's the best way for children to learn. So that just means let children lead their own learning, and you're just the person that provides the resources and the opportunities. I would say don't get hung up on the idea that children learning in a linear fashion. They just don't, do they? Some children will be stronger with physical development, and their communication development might take a little time to catch up, whereas their peers might be very, very confident in their communication skills, but not so much in their physical. So it's okay. It's okay for children to not to be all at the same level at the same time. And it's okay for one area to be stronger than another, as long as it's not falling so far behind that you have concerns. It's really important that we don't try and keep up with people. And that can actually, when we're talking about parents as well and saying, if parents are concerned about the child's development, if you're giving them something that shows that one area is lacking, for want of a better word, we know as professionals, actually, that's okay. They'll get to that in their own time, given some lovely opportunities and some support. But for a parent, that can be really, really worrying, can't it? So again, I think that's another reason I don't really do that type of report or observations like that. And then just to add on to that, an effective curriculum is, again, this is the government's own definition, is holistic and is ambitious, and it plans a plan that sets out what you intend children in your setting to learn and experience across all 7 areas of learning, tailored to individual age groups, and should be ambitious for all children. We should be expecting children to do well. We should be expecting them to achieve as highly as possible. And then pedagogy, I know sometimes that's a bit of a mystery word as well, and it's really very simple. All it means is it's the method you're going to use to support the children's development. So it just means the actual way you're going to do something. It could be that you're a setting that focuses on a particular type of theory, like Montessori, for example, or forest schools. And then your pedagogy is that you're supporting development through the forest schools ethos. And I think we've all heard of the 3 I's, or we should have done by now, because that came in with the early years inspection framework. Sorry, getting my words muddled up. Again, that's really easy. It's intent, implementation, and impact. Intent, what do you want the children to learn? That's the same as your curriculum. Implementation, how are you going to do that? That's your pedagogy. How are you going to do it? Practically, how are you going to do it? Do you need to buy something? Do you need to go somewhere? Do you need to make sure certain resources are within reach for a child? Whatever it is. And impact, what happened? Was it effective? So if we go back to Timmy and his learning to use the potty, your intent is that you want to support Timmy to learn to be potty trained. Your implementation is you're making sure the potty is out and that Timmy's aware of it, and that you've got lots of spare clothes, and you make a note, you make sure to be taking Timmy to the toilet regularly and that type of thing. And your impact is what happened. 2 or 3 weeks' time, did it work? If it didn't, assess it, reflect on it, and think, oh, actually, that didn't work. Maybe he doesn't like that potty. Maybe he prefers to go to use the toilet. Whatever it is, that's just an example. So that's your 3 I's: your intent, your implementation, and your impact. This is something that will also come up if you have an assessor or a sorry, something just popped up. An assessor or an inspector come around. That would come up in the learning walk. So as everyone
Sorry,
knows,
Kim, to interrupt. We've had a question. You did touch on it, but to do with the curriculum. Someone said, "How do you tell Ofsted your curriculum when you're basically child-led? Your curriculum's child-led. I have a general theme and topics I'd like to cover. The subjects may go on for a longer time and extended through the children's interests, or sometimes they don't last 2 minutes. Also, does the curriculum have to be written and shown?"
Okay, thank you. I'll just start with the last part of that. Nothing has to be written and shown. The only thing Ofsted will see when they come into your setting is your certificates, your registration certificate, your first aid certificate, that type of thing. They will not, it does say in the EYFS, so definitely read the EYFS. They will not, and the inspection handbook, there's a link to that at the end, will not look at any paperwork to do with children. They just won't. They won't look at anything at all. It's all down to how you say it. I would say you've just told me what your curriculum is, that your curriculum is child-led and that you go with the child's interests, you modify it if the child's interests change, and you're just doing it. If you have a think about what's in development matters, roughly what a child would be expecting to do roughly around that age, if you're familiar with that, and I would say make yourself familiar with that, then you're doing it. You're doing that already. That is your curriculum. So you just would explain it that way. I'm child-led. This is why I have these resources out. This child's particularly interested in, let's say, bugs. So Timmy came in last week. He was really interested in insects and bugs. And so this week I made sure that I'd got the magnifying glasses out and I put them in the garden so that he could have a look out around and see what he could look at if he wanted to. And that's what you said, it changes with the child. So Timmy might decide that he's not interested in bugs that following week. He might instead want to use those magnifying glasses as a saucepan in the mud kitchen, you know? So that's fine. If that's what he wants to do, that's fine. He's leading his own learning. So I would say have confidence in that what you just told me is your curriculum. You don't need to write anything down. You don't need to have any plans written down. Ofsted will not look at any of it. I mean, I can only speak for myself as going in as obviously I've had Ofsted inspections, had one a couple of years ago as my last one. And I've obviously gone into settings, childminder settings as an assessor. You want to know how well that person knows that child. You just need to be able to talk about that child almost as if they were your own child and be able to explain their sort of strengths, areas where they might need support, how you're supporting them. That's it. That is your curriculum, you know? Okay. So, and you know, I hope that's answered the question, but I'm very happy to chat a bit more at the end. An enabling environment. So how to have one and how to explain what it is. Anyone who's been to any of these sessions will know this is my favourite topic. I love an enabling environment. So an enabling environment contains open-ended resources and loose parts which children can access, use, move and combine independently. This encourages critical thinking and resilience, something we really, really want to support in children. So when you're the last person that asked the last question, when you're talking to whoever it is that's asking the question, you can say, it's child-led. I let the children select their own resources. This encourages their critical thinking and their resilience. An enabling environment enables choice and independence. Children that have confidence in their own choices have confidence in school age and as they get older, and they believe in themselves because they're confident in their own choices and they're independent. And really, we need to make sure that children are as independent as possible, don't we? It's not good for children to depend on adults for everything. We need, as practitioners, we need to be gradually letting the child move away, don't we? We support them with things, and then they're able to do things by themselves. And that's how it should be. And we're not doing children any favours if we're doing everything for them. And to quote our lovely friend Kate Cooling-Smith, I'm not sure if she's on here tonight, have a yes mindset. Let children do things themselves. This is a scissor question coming up. Let them use scissors. Let them pour drinks. Let them change their clothes. Let them wash their hands themselves. Let them do these things. Yeah, things might go wrong. They might put their t-shirt on back to front. They might tip their drink on the floor. It really doesn't matter. None of that matters, because this type of thing enables their resilience. So if someone came round to your setting and asked you about this, how are you supporting children's independence and their self-care skills, you can say, I let them do that. They call me if they need some support. And that's good. That's what we need to see in children. We don't want to see that children have to have an adult helping them with every tiny little thing. So consider the areas of development. We know we've got our 7 areas of development, haven't we? And ensure that your continuous provision, however you do that, because everyone's setting is different, isn't it? We all have different space and different, access to different areas and that type of thing. But just think about those 7 areas and make sure that you've got something out all the time that covers each of those areas. But also remember that learning is holistic. So don't panic if a child moves resources from one area to the other. Don't have that, as Kate says, have a yes mindset. Yes, you can take the Play-Doh into the sandpit, because that might be something really important to that child. They might have this idea in their head. They've got a lot of critical thinking going on. Let's enable it. Let's say yes. So let those areas be muddled up and don't stress about that too much, because that's very important to children's development. That's something that you can, once you've got an enabling environment, the phrase is the environment is the third teacher. So and it really is, because children lead their own learning when they have access to all these resources. And that's a really good way to explain your curriculum and your pedagogy, is that we have an enabling environment. I try and make sure that children are able to do all of these things by themselves as much as possible, with support if they need it. But I want them to be able to access things, to move things around as they choose to do, and to experiment. You want children to experiment. That's what play is really. Play is really experimentation, isn't it? So this is at my setting, and you can see these boys have got they've got a tub of water, tub from somewhere, and they've fixed it up to a fountain. In the corner behind the little one is the water fountain, and they've put a gutter there, and the water's running in to that tub. And these things have all come from different areas of the garden, and that's absolutely fine. And I haven't done any of this. They've done this all themselves. They've obviously got some idea in their head. I don't need to be involved. I don't need to interrupt them. I can just watch and see what's happening. I'm doing my day-to-day observation. It's just going into my head. I don't need to write it down. Yes, I took a picture, but I don't need to record it in any way. I already know what they're doing. I'm aware we've got quite a few questions. We'll get to that in a little while. I can see it's going to be one of those sessions where we have a lot of questions. I expected that anyway. So sharing progress, as some people have touched on already, we're going to be sharing progress with other professionals or parents, that type of thing. So this is a key element of your provision, is working with people, other people that are involved with the child. This could be the parents. They could go to another setting. You might have other professionals involved, health visitor, speech and language, social workers, etc. The EYFS states that childminders should keep parents and all carers up to date on the child's progress and development. Childminders should address any learning and development needs in partnership with parents and any other relevant professionals to ensure the entire early years experience contributes to their readiness for Key Stage 1. Remember, children going off to school are not at Key Stage 1. They're in the final year of the early years. So quite often that can be a sort of a stumbling point for parents sometimes, who feel that they should be able to do more than they can. So that's something you can address if you look at our transitions webinar from last time. The EYFS says there's no set way to do this. You don't have to do it a certain way, but there are some templates, etc., that you might like to use if you're going to share with parents or other professionals. Actually, it varies, doesn't it, from one professional to another. You might find that some professionals just want to do it via email. Others want to come around and speak to you in person. So you really have to take that case by case, but you don't have to have it written down. It's in your head. The progress of that child is in your head. You can write it down if someone actually needs it. So if the social worker says to you, can you write a report on Timmy, please, for me to take to court, then yeah, of course you can. But you've got his development already in your head. The one written assessment we do have to do is the 2-year progress check. It's sometimes called the integrated review, isn't it? In my part of Essex, I don't know if it varies around the county, it tends to be nearer to the 3rd birthday. So I don't even worry about it until the parent has said to me, I've had the letter about the 2-year check, and then I write a report. This focuses on the 3 prime areas of development: communication, PSD, and physical development. That's all. You don't need to worry about the others. You just need to write a very short summary of the child's development. So you could, if you weren't sure, you could refer to something like Development Matters, especially if you want to use some of the wording that's in there, maybe to clarify their development. Yeah, that's all. You can just write a quick paragraph on each section. Timmy can do this. He struggles with that. His physical skills are such and such. He really enjoys so and so. And if you've got an area where you're concerned about, you would pop in a little note about that. And just a general note, or what I tend to do is put just a general overview of the child. So Timmy's, enjoys coming to the setting and enjoys spending time with his friends, and is particularly interested in, I don't know, lorries or whatever it is at the moment. And then I just clarify on those 3 different sections. So this goes together with the health visitor who does the sort of more medical side of the check, to give us a holistic view of the child's development and identify any areas where they may need additional support. So I think most of us will be familiar with doing a 2-year check. Some people, I do sometimes get questions from people worried about doing one, but it really is very straightforward. You can download templates and things from places online, but actually it is just those 3 areas. I think actually there's something on the Ofsted website with a template, or it's in one of the handbooks, but you don't even need to do that. They just need to know roughly, those 3 areas, what's happening with that child, and then whether you've got any concerns. This is one area where, when I said I would do observations if I had concerns about a child. So if a child was coming up to their 2-year progress check, that's a really good point where you can think, okay, I am a bit concerned about Timmy's speech, and his 2-year progress check's probably going to be in the next 6 months. I'm going to make a note about that. And then it's a good opportunity to present your evidence at that same time. But you don't have to do that. That's just what I would do in that situation. Okay, we're getting to the summary. So let's have a think about how you can have confidence. Remember, this webinar is about having confidence to talk about your practice to someone who comes into your setting, an inspector or an assessor or someone from the local authority. And bear in mind, even if you've got paperwork, you might have folders and learning journeys and all that, they're not going to look at it. So if I'm going to come into your setting, let's pretend it's me, I'm going to ask you, can you describe the learning journey of a child in your setting? Can you explain what they're interested in and how they like to learn? Do they have a schema, for example? Can you explain how you're supporting their development? If they've got a schema, explain what they're doing and how you've noticed that and how you're supporting it. So you go find places where there are hills to roll down. Think about the resources and the opportunities you provide, because that's supporting their development, but also you yourself are supporting their development. In fact, you're the most important support for their development. Resources are great, but actually you're more important than any of that, because you're the person that enables the support. You're modeling and you're scaffolding, and you're the person that knows that child so well that you can provide all these opportunities that they need. And then if that child has areas that you've identified as needing support, how are you providing it? And is it working? So I would say if you have a child that you have referred for something, um, let's say speech and language, and they've come back and the therapist has put in place some sessions for them and might have sent back some um, sort of work for them to do with you. That's one example where you might be acting in a slightly more formal way as regards to writing things down or keeping records. But here we're talking about an absolutely typical child who hasn't really got, you haven't gotten concerns about them. Um, are the children in your setting making progress? Now, I know that some of you are writing, are keeping tracking develop documents, and that is completely up to you if you want to. But remember, the EYFS says it's not necessary, and inspectors aren't going to look at it. So imagine you haven't got those documents. How do you know if the children in your setting are making progress? If I was to ask someone at the group I'm running tomorrow, how do I know that child is making progress? Or how do you know? They can tell me, can't they? They just know. You just know that child is, you can say, oh, that she's had a brilliant week. She's been really confident and spoken to people, and she was quite shy a couple of weeks ago, but now she's really coming out of herself and she's being more confident talking to strangers, and she spoke to a lady on the bus and things like that. That's making progress for that child, isn't it? And you know that. You didn't have to write it down or record it. You didn't have to have a next step for it. That just happened because you were supporting them. So are you sharing information with parents and professionals? And that information sharing is completely up to you how you want to do it. If you want to do a document that's like a tracking document and send it to the parents, you can. It's absolutely fine. But you're not required to do it. As we've said before, there are occasions when professionals might need a document just for their own evidence. But because that's individual situations, it's probably easiest to cross those bridges when you come to it. If you can do all those things, if you can describe to myself coming into your setting or an inspector coming into your setting, the learning journey of that child, what they were doing when they joined you, what they're doing now, how you supported that development, how it's going forward, then you've got confidence in your practice. You're explaining your curriculum and your pedagogy. You already know it. I really, really wish I could. I think everyone I meet to do with the Stronger Practice Hub is are excellent practitioners. I just really wish I could instill some of that confidence in you that you've already got the knowledge. You just need to practice explaining it, really. So I really hope that's helped. I will go on to answer some questions. I just wanted to go onto the reference page. I know we've got time for a chat. Oh, if anyone's interested, I think I've got one more slot left for bespoke support this term. But if not, I can fit some in from September onwards. If anyone wants to come and talk about enabling environments, you can bring your children with you and they can play and we can have a chat about how to, set up an enabling environment, how to make your own environment more enabling, or anything at all that you want to talk about. This is my lovely art cabin. Come and, do some painting. Damon can help you with all of that if you want to email him. So I'm just going to let you know, you've got some references here that might help you. So we've got the Early Years Inspection Handbook, and I've put on there, not just for inspections, use the grade descriptors in there to guide your pedagogy, because they tell you what is an outstanding practitioner like, what does an outstanding practitioner do, and or a good practitioner. You can use those. I find it really helpful. The EYFS for childminders, and hopefully you've already all got that. Look at the Help for Early Years Providers website. That's got some really good little snippets of information on there about different areas of development and how you can support them. And when you do anything like that and anything like this coming to this webinar, it does help you to have more confidence, I think, in your offering and how you practice. The Stronger Practice Hub, I've got loads of videos on there, not just my webinars, but all sorts of things on their YouTube channels that can help you if you want to find out about enabling environments or loose parts or in the moment planning, and hear how other childminders do it and do it in a practical way. Then that's a good place to look. Then you've got an Ofsted web YouTube thing there called How Will Inspectors Consider the Progress of a Child in My Setting? I really urge you to watch that one because they clarify over and over again that they do not want to look at paperwork. They will be talking to you and expecting you to be able to explain that child's development. And then I've put in there the Essex local offer because I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that. But if you have got a child who's got some needs some extra support, this is a really good place to have a look for things like groups, support groups, and services that are available locally. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that, and I just want to show you a book. Hold on one second.